back and forth again. That's the way.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a listener request that's aiming for the stars, literally. The Golden Dome Missile Defense System.
Mm-hmm.
This is a proposal with an incredibly ambitious goal, totally reshaping how the U.S. defends its homeland against all sorts of modern missile threats.
Right. Initially, it was actually presented as Iron Dome for America. But just a month later, that got rebranded to Golden Dome.
And the person behind it, President Trump, he wasn't exactly shy about the goals or the timeline, was he?
Not at all. He laid out a remarkably ambitious target. He wanted it fully operational within 3 years.
3 years?
3 years. And with a success rate close to 100%, that kind of timeline, well, it immediately raises flags for defense experts, as we'll definitely get into.
Right. And this Golden Dome, it's not like it's supposed to be one single amazing gadget, is it? Sounds more complex.
Oh, definitely. It's envisioned as a system of systems.
Yeah.
So think of it like taking our current defenses, ground-based interceptors, radar.
Stuff we already have.
Exactly. And then layering in completely new technologies, especially stuff based in space, all working together, ideally under one unified framework.
So that branding change, Iron Dome to Golden Dome, feels like there's some strategic messaging there. What's the thinking?
Oh, absolutely. Iron Dome for America was clearly trying to link it to Israel's Iron Dome, which people see as successful, almost impenetrable.
Right, that perception is strong.
Switching to Golden Dome keeps that idea of invulnerability, but, makes it sound bigger, grander. But it's crucial to understand right away, defending the entire U.S. homeland from sophisticated missiles is a completely different ballgame than Israel's Iron Dome dealing with shorter range rockets.
Yeah, that's a huge difference in scale and threat.
It really is. It's like comparing, swatting a fly to stopping a freight train. Vastly different challenges.
That's a really important distinction. So we have this super ambitious 3-year goal, this vision of near perfect defense. But you mentioned experts aren't really buying that timeline. What are they saying?
Yeah, the gap is pretty stark. For instance, retired Air Force General Glenn Van Herk, he estimated that just the space-based parts, the sensors and interceptors, which are key, could realistically take 5 to 10 years, just that part. And the general feeling among defense leaders is that building something this comprehensive, it's just not an overnight thing.
So right away, there's this big tension, political goals versus, the physics and engineering reality.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's dig into the tech then. Space-based interceptors seem like a really central piece. What's the big idea behind putting weapons in space?
Yeah, weapons in space is definitely a core element, and the big priority is what's called boost phase intercept.
Boost phase.
That's the very first stage, right after a missile launches. It's moving relatively slowly, burning bright. It's the most vulnerable point.
Ah, okay.
Chief of Space Operations General Saltzman put it very directly. He said, it's not just that we want space-based interceptors, we want them in the boost phase. Hitting it then gives you the best shot.
Makes sense. Get it early. So who's working on this?
Well, the Missile Defense Agency, MDA, they're working closely with the Space Force.
Yeah.
And they're bringing in traditional defense contractors, but also some non-traditional companies too, really trying to push the envelope.
Haven't we tried space-based interceptors before? Seems like I remember something.
You do. Yeah, there have been past efforts, and they've consistently hit major roadblocks, mostly cost and, frankly, technical feasibility. Some old estimates figured you'd need thousands of these things just for a limited threat.
Thousands. Wow.
And here's the kicker, a really crucial point from the assessment. The actual technology needed for operational space-based interceptors does not currently exist.
Okay, wait. So it's central to the vision, but we can't actually do it yet.
In an operational, ready-to-go form, no. That's a fundamental gap right now.
And if we could do it, where would these intercepts actually happen? You mentioned boost phase.
Right. And this is another huge wrinkle. The assessment itself notes that any such intercept is likely to occur well within an adversary's territory.
Or their country.
Exactly. Think about the implications. Shooting down a missile over, say, Russia or China, even if it's their missile aimed at us.
Could be seen as an act of war?
Or at least a major violation of sovereignty. So, technically desirable?
Yeah.
Geopolitically and legally? Extremely complicated.
Definitely adds another layer. Okay, so besides trying to shoot missiles down from space, what other advanced tracking tech is part of this Golden Dome plan?
You need sophisticated tracking, absolutely. A key piece is HBTSS, Hypersonic Ballistic Tracking Space Sensors.
Okay.
It's a joint MDA Space Force thing. First 2 satellites went up in February 2024. Yeah. And like the name says, it's specifically for detecting and tracking those really fast, maneuverable hypersonic threats.
Which are a growing concern.
Big time. L3 Harris, one of the developers, says the sensor's ready for full production. And they've already used it successfully in tests, tracked hypersonic flights, gathered tons of data. They even did a demo in March, simulating tracking and sending data for an intercept.
So that's a step forward for hypersonics. What else is in the tracking toolkit?
There's also the DSS, or Discriminating Space Sensor. MDA is prototyping this. The goal here is to get much better at telling the real missile warheads, apart from decoys, debris, space junk, while they're in mid-course flight.
Makes the intercepts count.
Exactly. Make them more effective.
Yeah.
Prototype launch for DSS is targeted for 2029. Then you've got PWSA, the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture. That's the Space Development Agency's project.
Okay.
Think a large constellation of satellites in low Earth orbit, LEO, with wide-view sensors for global warning and tracking. It's described as a resilient, layered network. Lots of eyes in the sky.
So HBTSS, DSS, PWSA, lots of acronyms, lots of sensors. Are ground systems getting upgrades too?
Absolutely. The DDN system, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, its AIM-TP-Y2 radar, is getting a major boost. Raytheon delivered a version with a gallium nitride array.
Which means?
Basically, much more sensitive, longer range, better at handling hypersonics. It's barely so sensitive it can spot tiny objects right after a missile's booster separates.
Giving more warning time.
More time, and it helps tell the real threats from leftover bits and pieces. Better discrimination.
Got it. And you mentioned AI earlier. How does that fit into processing all this tracking data?
AI is really seen as the key to making sense of it all, through something called sensor fusion.
Sensor fusion?
Yeah, taking data from all different kinds of sensors, infrared, radar, UV, optical, and having AI algorithms weave it together into a much clearer real-time picture of what's actually happening out there.
So it sees the whole picture, not just pieces.
Exactly. It's crucial for tracking in cluttered environments, or maybe if GPS is jammed. It should significantly improve targeting accuracy. Think of it like AI looking at a dozen puzzle pieces simultaneously and instantly seeing the image.
Okay, so we're gathering all this data using AI to make sense of it. How does that translate into actually stopping a missile? That seems to be where the AI-driven command and control network comes in.
Precisely. Golden Dome envisions AI as the central nervous system managing this incredibly complex operation. The Army, for example, they're looking at AI to increase system autonomy, meaning fewer people needed.
Potentially, yeah. Reducing manpower is often a goal. The idea is AI handles the heavy lifting data analysis, prioritizing threats, enabling much faster decisions for intercepts, especially against those super fast hypersonics. They're using their Guam defense system as a test bed for this stuff.
And the Air Force, too.
Air Force is also experimenting with AI for battle management, yes.
Now, when you say faster decisions,
yeah.
Are we talking about AI deciding to launch interceptors all on its own? That sounds concerning to some.
It's a valid concern, and the assessment does touch on it. The plan includes defined trigger points, specific moments where a human operator is supposed to step in and make the final call, the go, no go, for, higher level actions.
This human in the loop, at least for the big decisions.
That's the stated plan. However, the ultimate vision, the long-term goal, does seem to include the potential for fully AI-powered, closed-loop decision chains. Meaning the whole sequence, identify threat, target it, engage. It could happen in milliseconds, potentially without direct human intervention in that loop.
And that's where the incredible speed and efficiency potential clashes with really significant ethical questions. Autonomous lethal force, accountability, unintended escalation.
Big questions.
Huge questions. And the ethical frameworks, the operational rules for how humans and AI work together like that, they're still very much being figured out. They're nascent.
And how does this new AI brain connect with the missile defense systems we already have deployed? You said it's a system of systems.
Right. The core idea is integration and augmentation. Bring GMD, FADE, Patriot, the radar satellites all under this Golden Dome umbrella and make them work better together.
Like the THAAD radar example.
Exactly. That upgraded THAAD radar being designed to guide interceptors from THAAD, Standard Missile, and Patriot batteries that shows the intent for cross-system cooperation.
But just because the tech can connect doesn't mean it will work together smoothly under pressure, does it?
You've absolutely hit on a critical point. The fact that it keeps being called a system of systems underlines the immense complexity. Getting these separate, incredibly complex systems, often built by different companies for different services,
different priorities,
to truly integrate into one seamless, reliable, effective defense. That might be the biggest hurdle of all. It's not just technical, making the software talk. It's organizational, bureaucratic, cultural.
Breaking down silos.
Exactly. The assessment specifically mentions needing unified command and control and overcoming organizational boundaries and cultural resistance. So even if every piece of tech works perfectly on its own, making the whole orchestra play in tune, that could be the real challenge.
Like conducting a symphony where everyone's brilliant, but they've never rehearsed together.
That's a good analogy.
And to try and make integration easier and maybe keep costs down, I see this mention of open architecture principles. What does that mean here?
So the plan is to use an open architecture. Think of it like using standard USB ports instead of everyone having their own proprietary connector.
Okay.
It means designing the system in modules using publicly known standards. The goal is to make it easier to plug in new tech later, encourage competition between companies, and avoid getting locked into one vendor. Open source software is already pretty common in national security.
Makes sense. Faster upgrades, more options.
And there's talk of using open source AI models too, which could help the DoD find more suppliers and deploy AI securely.
Are there any downsides to being that open with defense technology, though?
There is a potential vulnerability, yeah. While open source speeds things up, publicly sharing the underlying code or AI model weights could, theoretically, aid adversaries in developing their own capabilities.
So it's a trade-off, innovation versus security.
It's definitely a balancing act they'll need to manage carefully.
Okay, we've covered the vision, the tech, but how feasible is all this, really? What are the big technical mountains they need to climb?
Feasibility is absolutely the trillion-dollar question, maybe literally. And there are huge challenges. First, just the sheer complexity of building this massively enlarged, layered system of systems for the whole U.S. homeland.
Ground, air, sea, space, all connected.
All needing to work under unified command, ideally intercepting threats in any phase boost mid-course terminal. And as General Folsman said about boost phase intercept from space, that's a no joke of a physics problem. Incredible precision needed over vast distances at high speeds.
And that Manhattan Project comparison that came up, what was the point there?
Right. Vice Chief of Space Operations General Getling made that comparison. His point wasn't just the scale, but the management structure. The Manhattan Project had incredibly centralized authority, streamlined decisions.
Cut through the bureaucracy.
Exactly. He contrasted that with the current missile defense setup, which he called multi-entity committee-based with differing priorities. His argument is, without that kind of focused authority, managing something like Golden Dome effectively is going to be extremely difficult. The challenge isn't just inventing the tech, it's integrating and managing it across the board.
So the organization itself could be a bottleneck. What about the tech readiness? President Trump sounded pretty confident about having the phenomenal technology now.
He did contrast it with the SDI era, suggesting the tech is ready now, but expert consensus is more cautious. As we said, operational space-based interceptors, they do not currently exist.
Still a ways off.
Seems so. Rear Admiral Montgomery estimated maybe 7 to 10 years for a comprehensive system, and even that might have limitations. A 2024 report suggested directed energy weapons for ICBMs, probably not before 2035. So progress, yes, but still significant technological gaps, especially for that space-based boost phase piece.
And it needs constant updating anyway.
Absolutely. Constant upgrades and developmental evolution will be essential just to keep pace.
Which brings us back to that timeline. President Trump's less than 3 years sounds even more like a stretch now.
Exceptionally ambitious. Feels like the polite term. Remember General Van Herk's 5 to 10 years just for the space layer?
Right.
The Congressional Research Service also suggests Homeland Defense is more challenging and needs more funding than current efforts. And Rear Admiral Montgomery explicitly warned that rushing it could lead to a faulty end product.
And a dangerous false sense of security.
Exactly. An unreliable shield could be worse than no shield if it leads to miscalculations or causes us to neglect other proven deterrents.
So even if we build something fast, it might not work reliably. What about countermeasures? Can adversaries just overwhelm it or trick it?
That's a huge concern. Even current systems like SBRs can struggle to tell real targets from decoys. The DSS sensor aims to improve that, but it's an ongoing battle. Experts warn adversaries could use clustering launches, firing many missiles at once, or directly attack the satellites Golden Dome relies on.
The same problems SDI faced.
Pretty much, yeah. Overwhelming the defenses, protecting the space assets, reliably discriminating decoys, these are persistent challenges. Plus, hypersonics add new wrinkles with speed, maneuverability, lower flight paths.
And adversaries are developing space weapons too.
Yes. The assessment mentions adversaries developing offensive counter-space capabilities, things to disable our satellites. Russia is reportedly studying space-based nuclear weapons concepts. This directly threatens the survivability of space-based weapons, a foundation of Golden Dome, and fuels a continuous arms race dynamic.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly expensive. What are the cost estimates floating around for Golden Dome?
The costs, they are. Well, they're all over the place. President Trump initially put the total figure at $175 billion, with $25 billion up front. But the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, estimates the space-based part alone could hit $542 billion over 20 years.
$500 billion, just for the space part.
Yeah, and their broader range goes from $264 billion up to $831 billion, depending on how many interceptors. General Saltzman even suggested the CBO's high number might be too low.
Wow, and senators are talking trillions.
Some unofficial estimates thrown around by senators have reached trillions, or even $6.2 trillion. So you have the initial pitch of $175 billion versus independent estimates that are vastly higher, potentially into the trillions for the whole thing over its lifetime.
That's an astronomical difference.
It is. And remember, we've already spent over $415 billion on missile defense with arguably limited results. We currently spend about $30 billion a year. This huge gap in estimates isn't unheard of for mega projects, sometimes called cost delirium.
Like with SDI?
Exactly. Low initial estimates can be a political tactic, but the risk is it becomes an immense drain on defense resources, pulling funds from other vital areas. Big questions about opportunity costs and fiscal sustainability.
And is the funding actually there yet? Has Congress approved this?
Not really secured, no. President Trump requested that initial $25 billion via specific act. The House Armed Services Committee did put that amount into their version of the FY25 defense bill.
But that's just one step.
Right. It still needs Senate approval, full Congress approval. So despite public confidence from the administration, there's no secured funding yet, and it's still officially in early development.
Who stands to benefit financially if this goes forward? Which companies?
Oh, a lot of contractors are lining up. The Pentagon got over 360 responses. You've got the big traditional players, Lockheed, Booz Allen, RTX, Boeing, but also newer tech firms like Palantir and Anduril.
And SpaceX.
SpaceX is involved, reportedly partnering with others. And they've proposed a pretty novel idea, a subscription service model.
Subscription service for missile defense.
Yeah. President Trump has highlighted potential job creation, and clearly it would be a massive payday for the companies involved. But that subscription model from SpaceX raises really interesting questions about ownership, control, national security implications. What happens in a crisis? Who controls the data? It's a potentially big shift in defense procurement.
Definitely something different. Okay, so massive costs, technical uncertainties. What are the wider political and strategic ripples of pursuing Golden Dome?
Well, the executive order itself signaled a clear shift in U.S. strategy, trying to move beyond a defense framework built for a, quote, far more benign strategic threat environment.
Recognizing the world has changed.
Right. If successful, it could potentially redefine nuclear deterrence, space strategy, arms control, the whole landscape. But it immediately triggers major concerns about escalating tensions, a new arms race in space.
China's reaction, for instance.
China has been very strong in its condemnation, calling it deeply destabilizing, accusing the U.S. of trying to weaponize space with clear offensive implications, undermining stability and arms control. It's that classic security dilemma playing out.
What we see as defense, they see as offense.
Exactly, and feel they have to respond, which just spirals.
How does this pursuit of a shield affect deterrence and arms control?
There's a real worry it could weaken existing arms control and maybe even encourage proliferation. The logic is, if the U.S. builds a shield adversaries think might work, they might feel they need more offensive weapons to guarantee their deterrence still holds.
To overwhelm the shield.
Right. Experts like James N. Miller argue we're not going to escape mutual assured destruction vis-a-vis Russia or China. That mutual vulnerability is still the reality. And historically, SDI stalled arms talks. Critics fear Golden Dome could do the same, making denuclearization harder. The quest for absolute security, for one, often makes everyone less secure.
What about other countries? Russia? Allies?
Russia's reaction was more nuanced than China's. They called it a sovereign matter for the U.S., but also warned it could spur their development of space weapons. Kind of a pragmatic warning.
Interesting contrast with China.
Yeah. Canada, meanwhile, expressed willingness to participate, maybe with sensor tech, data sharing. And the original directive did emphasize allied collaboration. The different reactions really show the complex geopolitics around space weaponization.
And finally, what about transparency and oversight for such a massive, controversial program?
There's been some red flags raised. A Reuters report mentioned deeply troubling aspects of early contract talks, suggesting they deviated from normal processes, raising transparency concerns.
Got a good look.
Plus, the fact the Pentagon has repeatedly failed to ever pass an audit doesn't exactly inspire confidence about financial accountability on something this huge. And the Congressional Research Service noted a lack of public details on tech specs and deliverables, making effective oversight harder for Congress and for you, the public.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, Golden Dome is clearly huge in ambition, but faces equally huge challenges. How does it stack up against past efforts like SDI or current systems like Iron Dome?
Well, the Iron Dome comparison, as we've said, is mostly rhetorical. It draws inspiration, sure, but the scale and threat are completely different. Defending the vast U.S. against ICBMs and hypersonics is just not comparable to Israel's challenge. So that comparison can be misleading.
Sets unrealistic expectations, maybe.
Potentially. Compared to existing U.S. systems like GMD, Theodate, Patriot, Golden Dome aims to vastly exceed their capabilities, acknowledging they're seen as insufficient now.
And compared to SDI, Star Wars.
The parallels are unavoidable. Grand visions, reliance on bleeding edge or non-existent tech, massive cost concerns, fears of triggering an arms race. It's very similar. Proponents say the tech is better now, but critics point out that many of SDI's fundamental problems being overwhelmed, space weapon survivability, decoys still haven't been fully solved.
So the same core challenges remain.
Many of them, yes. SDI was largely abandoned due to cost and tech immaturity. The question is whether Golden Dome can bring that cycle, or if it's destined to repeat it, chasing that elusive, impenetrable shield, which many experts still call a fantasy.
So to bring it all together for you, our listener, Golden Dome is this incredibly ambitious vision, a near-perfect shield, space-based tech, AI. But as we've unpacked, it faces enormous technical hurdles, potentially astronomical costs, deep strategic questions about arms races, and it echoes many challenges from SDI decades ago, and it's fundamentally different from something like Iron Dome.
That sums it up well. The goals, the tech, the cost, the geopolitical fallout. It's a lot to weigh.
So the question we leave you with is this. Given all these complexities, all these uncertainties, does Golden Dome represent a necessary evolution in defense, a logical next step? Or is it a potentially incredibly costly, maybe destabilizing gamble? What are the long-term implications for global security, for technology, if this kind of system actually gets built or if it doesn't? Definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Come on, let's go, y'all. Overcome and adapt, reinforce the understructure, play the role of the cast. Don't break when it's hard, just bend, have your fun, play your part, know when the night ends. Create, protect, preserve, put it all on the line and give them what they deserve. Watch the bubble of the steel, Tennessee whiskey and a soft red-headed thrill. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again. There's a circle in the mud, a rebel of the sticks who says it is what it was. They don't want to admit that it just goes on and on and on again. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again. That's the way it goes. Back and forth again.